Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Lily's revenge begins. Phyllis and Kane exposed in shocking dark plot. The young and the restless explodes into chaos as Lily Winters finally steps out of the shadows and unleashes a meticulously crafted revenge that shakes Genoa City to its core. A revenge born not of impulse, but of long nights, quiet observations, and the slow-burning fury of a woman who has been underestimated for far too long, because Lily, who once believed in transparency, loyalty, and the possibility of redemption, now understands that the city's most dangerous weapons are secrets, timing, and truth delivered with surgical precision, and as whispers turn into thunder, it becomes devastatingly clear that Phyllis Summers and Kane Ashby have been hiding something far darker than anyone imagined. A twisted alliance formed in desperation and greed, fueled by resentment and ambition, and cemented by a crime they believed would never see the light of day. But Lily has seen it, pieced it together fragment by fragment, and now she's ready to burn the lies down to the ground, beginning with a shocking public unmasking that leaves even the most seasoned power players stunned, because the story begins months earlier when Lily noticed the subtle shifts in Phyllis's behavior, the sudden mood swings, the frantic phone calls abruptly ended, the way Kane seemed to appear whenever Phyllis was on the brink of losing control, offering calm words and strategic advice. An odd pairing that raised red flags, especially when financial records at Chancellor Winters didn't add up. Money moving through shell companies, accounts linked back to a mysterious consulting firm that Lily soon discovered was nothing more than a front, a laundering channel designed to hide a series of blackmail payments tied to a scandal so explosive it could ruin reputations, destroy families, and bring down corporations. And as Lily dug deeper, she realized Phyllis and Kane had orchestrated a covert scheme involving corporate espionage, insider trading, and the deliberate sabotage of competitors, including their own supposed allies, manipulating stock prices, leaking confidential information, and framing innocent parties to divert suspicion, all while presenting themselves as victims of circumstance. And the most horrifying revelation of all came when Lily uncovered evidence suggesting that a tragic incident once thought to be an accident had in fact been engineered, a calculated move to silence a whistleblower who had threatened to expose the entire operation. And though the name of that person was buried under legal jargon and sealed files, Lily knew the truth, and it shattered her, because the betrayal wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal, touching people she loved, lives permanently altered by a life Phyllis and Kane had sworn to protect at any cost. And instead of confronting them immediately, Lily chose patience, allowing them to grow complacent, feeding them false confidence by pretending to remain oblivious, even extending olive branches that made Phyllis smug and Kane reckless, convinced they had outplayed everyone, while Lily quietly assembled her endgame, gathering allies who had once been burned by Phyllis's ruthless ambition or Kane's smooth-talking duplicity, allies who were initially skeptical but soon realized Lily wasn't seeking revenge for revenge's sake. She was seeking justice wrapped in poetic irony, and when the moment arrived, it did so during a high-profile gala meant to celebrate a major business merger, a night dripping in glamour, champagne, and carefully curated smiles, where Genoa City's elite gathered unaware they were about to witness the social equivalent of an earthquake, because as Lily took the stage to deliver her speech, the room hushed, expecting the usual polished remarks, but instead Lily's voice cut through the air with controlled fury as she thanked Phyllis and Kane for their contributions. A phrase that drew nervous laughter until the screens behind her flickered to life, displaying documents, audio recordings, and time-stamped messages that mapped out the entire dark plot in excruciating detail, showing Phyllis's frantic voice coordinating payoffs, Kane's strategic memos outlining sabotage plans, and a chilling exchange that suggested they had knowingly set events in motion that led to irreversible harm. And as the evidence unfolded, gasps echoed through the room, Phyllis's face draining of color as her trademark bravado crumbled into raw panic, Kane attempting to interrupt, to spin, to charm his way out, only to be silenced by Lily's final reveal, a signed confession obtained from a middleman they had both discarded when he became inconvenient, a confession corroborated by financial trails and independent audits, leaving no room for denial. and the fallout was immediate and brutal. Security escorting Phyllis and Kane out as reporters descended. Phones buzzing, headlines already forming, while Lily stood unmoved, her expression a mixture of sorrow and steel. Knowing this was only the beginning, because the legal consequences would be severe, but the personal consequences would be catastrophic, with friendships imploding, alliances shattering, and long-held perceptions forever altered, as Phyllis, once the queen of reinvention, found herself isolated, her manipulations finally exposed, her credibility in ruins, and Kane, who had built his identity on charm and reinvention, now faced the reality that no accent, no apology, no grand gesture could undo the truth laid bare. And yet the story doesn't end there, because Lily's revenge is not just about punishment. It's about reclamation, reclaiming her voice, her power, and the moral center of a city that has too often rewarded the loudest liar. And in the days that follow, Genoa City reels as investigations widen, dragging other secrets into the light, forcing characters to confront uncomfortable questions about complicity and silence, while Lily navigates her own emotional aftermath, grappling with the cost of vengeance even when it's justified, haunted by the knowledge that exposing Phyllis and Kane also means reliving the pain they caused, but strengthened by the realization that she refused to become like them, choosing truth over manipulation, transparency over fear, and as the shockwaves continue to ripple, one thing becomes undeniable. Lily Winters has transformed from a woman wronged into a force to be reckoned with, and her calculated, fearless takedown of Phyllis and Kane marks a turning point for the young and the restless, a reminder that in Genoa City, no secret stays buried forever, no alliance is unbreakable, and when revenge comes wrapped in truth, it doesn't just destroy, it reshapes the future, leaving everyone to wonder who will rise from the ashes, who will fall next, and whether the city will ever truly recover from the night Lily decided it was time to end the lies once and for all. Lily's revenge continues. The aftermath turns Genoa City upside down. And as the doors of the gala slammed shut behind Phyllis Summers and Kane Ashby, the true devastation of Lily Winters' masterstroke only began to reveal itself, because exposure is never a single moment in Genoa City. It is a slow, merciless unraveling, and the morning after Lily's bombshell felt like the city had woken up inside a storm of whispers, subpoenas, emergency board meetings, and fractured loyalties, with phones ringing nonstop as executives scrambled to distance themselves from the tainted duo, lawyers issuing carefully worded statements, and former allies suddenly unable to remember how long they'd truly trusted Phyllis or Kane, while Lily, calm yet emotionally bruised, watched from a distance as the world finally caught up to the truth she had carried alone for so long, because the evidence she revealed was only the surface layer, and behind-the-scenes investigators were already pulling threads that exposed an even deeper conspiracy, one that suggested Phyllis and Kane had not merely reacted to opportunity, but had actively shaped chaos to serve their own agenda, manipulating personal rivalries, exploiting vulnerabilities, and weaponizing secrets that were never meant to be used as currency. And as those revelations mounted, it became impossible for anyone to deny that Lily's so-called revenge had actually been restraint, because she could have destroyed them privately, quietly, and permanently. Yet instead she chose a public reckoning that forced Genoa City to confront its own moral rot, and that decision sent shockwaves through every major family, especially as familiar names began appearing in legal documents, not necessarily as perpetrators, but as enablers who had benefited from Phyllis and Kane's schemes without ever asking the hard questions, and suddenly long-standing grudges took on new meaning, old betrayals resurfaced, and relationships once dismissed as messy soap drama were reclassified as strategic chess moves in a game where innocence was always optional, and at the center of it all stood Lily, navigating the paradox of being both celebrated and scrutinized, praised for her courage, yet questioned for how long she had known, whether she had waited too long, whether her silence had allowed damage to continue, questions that cut deeply because Lily herself had wrestled with them in countless sleepless nights, weighing the cost of exposure against the risk of becoming complicit, and though she refused to publicly justify her choices, Those closest to her saw the toll it took, the quiet moments when her resolve wavered, when memories of trust shattered replayed in her mind, especially memories involving Cain, a man she once believed shared her values, only to learn that beneath his polished charm lay a capacity for betrayal that rivaled even Phyllis's legendary ruthlessness. And speaking of Phyllis, her spiral was swift and brutal, because stripped of control, she had nothing left to manipulate, no narrative to spin, no enemy to blame without evidence snapping back in her face. And as she attempted damage control, giving frantic interviews and making thinly veiled threats, it became painfully obvious that this time she had overplayed her hand, that the city had grown tired of her chaos, her justifications, her insistence that every disaster she caused was somehow someone else's fault. And for the first time in a long time, Phyllis found herself truly alone, watching former friends step away, watching doors close that had once flown open at the sound of her name, while Cain faced his own reckoning, one that cut even deeper because his downfall carried the weight of disappointment rather than shock, as those who had believed in his redemption now realized that reinvention without accountability is just deception in a better suit. And as legal pressure mounted, Cain's attempts to negotiate, to bargain information for leniency, only confirmed what Lily already knew, that when cornered, he would always choose himself, even if it meant dragging others down with him. And that realization, more than any document or recording, became Lily's quiet vindication, because it proved she had been right to stop protecting a man who never truly protected her. And while the city debated villains and victims, Lily turned her focus forward, restructuring her company, implementing transparency measures that sent a clear message that the era of shadow deals was over, even if it cost her power in the short term, because she understood something her enemies never did. Trust, once broken, can only be rebuilt through consistent truth, and that philosophy began influencing others, sparking uncomfortable conversations in boardrooms and living rooms alike about accountability, loyalty, and the seductive danger of looking the other way. And yet, despite the sense of moral awakening, the emotional fallout remained raw, because revenge, even righteous revenge, leaves scars, and Lily couldn't escape the weight of knowing that her actions had set off a chain reaction that would devastate families, children, and legacies. And in quieter moments, she questioned whether justice always had to be so loud, so destructive, only to remind herself that silence had already done enough damage. And as weeks passed and court dates loomed, Genoa City settled into a tense new normal, one where every smile felt measured, every alliance provisional, and every secret potentially lethal. Because Lily's move had changed the rules, proving that patience could be more dangerous than impulse, and that the most devastating weapon in a city built on deception is the truth revealed at the perfect moment. And as Phyllis and Cain prepared to face consequences they never believed would catch them, the rest of Genoa City was left staring into the mirror Lily had held up, forced to ask who they would become now that the lies had been stripped away, and whether they would learn from the ashes or simply wait for the next reckoning. Because if Lily Winters had proven anything, it was that revenge doesn't always come with rage and screaming. It comes with clarity, courage, and the unshakable decision to end the cycle, no matter the cost. And as the dust slowly settled, one chilling question lingered in the air, whispered in hallways and behind closed doors. If Lily could take down Phyllis and Cain, two of the most calculating players Genoa City has ever known, then who else's secrets are already in her sights? And how long before the next shocking exposure changes everything all over again? And just when Genoa City believed the worst had already passed, when Lily Winters' stunning exposure of Phyllis Summers and Cain Ashby felt like the final act of a perfectly executed takedown, the truth revealed itself to be far more dangerous, because Lily's revenge was never meant to end with public humiliation or legal consequences alone. It was the opening move in a calculated restructuring of power that would force every major player to choose sides, confront their past compromises, and Reckon with the reality that the age of unchecked manipulation had officially ended, as the city entered a phase of quiet paranoia where every whispered conversation carried weight, and every unexpected knock on the door felt like the prelude to another secret being dragged into the light. And at the heart of this escalating storm stood Lily, composed yet relentless, fully aware that once you expose monsters, you must be prepared for the chaos they unleash in their final attempts to survive. Because Phyllis, cornered and desperate, refused to go quietly, her fury morphing into obsession as she convinced herself that Lily hadn't just ruined her life, but had stolen something she believed was hers by right. Control, narrative dominance, and the twisted moral high ground she'd long claimed through survival at any cost. And in her unraveling, Phyllis began lashing out, leaking half-truths, dredging up old scandals, and attempting to rewrite history by portraying herself as a necessary evil in a corrupt system, a martyr punished for doing what others were too weak to do. But this time the city didn't rally around her chaos, because Lily had changed the temperature of the room, making manipulation feel outdated and transparency revolutionary. And as Phyllis burned bridges at record speed, it became painfully clear that her greatest fear wasn't prison or financial ruin, it was irrelevance. The unbearable idea that Genoa City might finally move on without her, while Kane's descent followed a different, more insidious path, because unlike Phyllis, Kane still believed he could talk his way out, that charm and selective remorse could soften even the harshest consequences, and so he began quietly approaching former allies, offering information, trading secrets, subtly implying that Lily herself wasn't as clean as she appeared, that her patience had masked ambition just as ruthless as his own. But every attempt backfired, because Lily had already anticipated his moves, preemptively disclosing uncomfortable truths about her own past decisions, acknowledging mistakes before Kane could weaponize them, a strategy that disarmed his leverage entirely and left him exposed as the only one still pretending innocence was optional. And as his options dwindled, Kane's bitterness turned inward, his fixation on Lily intensifying into resentment, convinced that if she hadn't changed, if she'd remained the forgiving, understanding woman he once knew, none of this would have happened, a belief that perfectly encapsulated why Lily's revenge was necessary in the first place, because she had outgrown the version of herself that existed to absorb other people's sins, and that evolution sent ripples far beyond Phyllis and Kane, reaching families who had long benefited from backroom deals and strategic silence, forcing difficult conversations between parents and children, partners and spouses, as trust was reevaluated and long-standing myths about loyalty were dismantled. And in the corporate arena, the impact was even more severe, with audits uncovering irregularities once dismissed as industry standard, executives resigning before they could be named, and shareholders demanding accountability in a way Genoa City hadn't seen in decades, because Lily's actions had ignited something dangerous, hope mixed with fear, that if one woman could bring down two of the most notorious survivors in town, then no one was untouchable anymore. And amid this upheaval, Lily faced her own internal battle, because power gained through truth carries a different kind of burden, one that doesn't fade with applause or headlines. And in quiet moments, she questioned whether she had become too hardened, whether the strategic distance she now maintained from others was protection or armor that might eventually isolate her. Yet every doubt was tempered by the undeniable reality that her clarity had saved others from future harm, that by ending Phyllis and Kane's reign of manipulation, she had broken a cycle that had consumed countless lives, and that knowledge grounded her as the city continued to shift around her. And then came the twist no one expected, the revelation that Phyllis and Kane's dark plot wasn't confined to business or blackmail alone, but had extended into personal vendettas that reshaped key relationships across Genoa City. As evidence surfaced showing they had deliberately stoked rivalries, fed misinformation to lovers and friends, and orchestrated emotional betrayals to keep people divided and distracted, a revelation that sent shockwaves through households already strained by mistrust, because it meant that some of the most painful moments in recent memory, breakups, estrangements, Even violent confrontations had been manipulated from behind the scenes, and the collective rage that followed was explosive, turning Phyllis and Kane from scandalized figures into symbols of everything the city was desperate to leave behind. While Lily, though vindicated, was forced to confront the human cost of those manipulations, offering quiet apologies where silence had once been her shield, rebuilding bridges not with grand speeches, but with consistency, honesty, and the willingness to sit with discomfort. And as trials approached and plea deals were whispered about, the possibility emerged that Phyllis and Kane might attempt one final